So this one, what I was thinking was potentially having like a full arm, so being like the mirror image of your other arm.
Yeah.
And then, but kind of breaking it down into sections. So partly skin, so mimicking the skin that you have on the other side, but then having other sections that are made up of different materials.
So a few years ago, I found some really amazing images of an actress and model called Grace Mandeville, who she has her piece of her arm missing like me. And she had a really cool arm made of armour and feathers, and I was just like, I just love it so much. I'm really like anti prosthetics, anything that looks kind of like an arm I'm against. So when I saw this, a beautiful piece of art, I thought I need to find out who made this.
So this was the second mood board, and this one's a little bit more, so I've got prism, time, spirituality, cosmos and connection. So this project is really exciting one actually. We've been able to work with just the one person, so that's Kelly Knox, and develop her mood board, which was really eclectic, into creating these 3 limbs, which are all very different and represent her different sides as well.
I also have a campaign called Diversity, Not Disability. I believe that disability should be part of the diversity agenda, because so often it's left out in fashion and the beauty industry. So I'm really passionate about getting disability out there in fashion, in beauty, making it beautiful, visual and positive.
This one would be like a kind of like take the form of an arm, but maybe kind of breaking it down into like a geometric kind of structure.
Wow.
And then playing with light and that kind of prism effect. And so the third one is a little bit more interactive. And so you're into fantasy, UFOs, aliens, sci-fi and the botanical world. So I thought combine these things and perhaps come up with something that's like a tentacle, but is kind of like organic, so it would be like a vine type thing, and that you could actually use to interact with.
I'm blown away by Sophie's creations, so I'm really excited about what we're going to create this time round. I love it.
Yeah, do you love it? Oh good, oh cool, okay, wicked. Well, let's do it then. So with each arm, I've needed to call upon different skills and techniques and processes, and I've got a team together that work really, really well together. So we've got Danny Claude, who's doing the mechanical engineering, helping with the concept design.
Hi, I'm Danny. I'm a product designer from New Zealand, living in London. For this project, I'm working on concept creation, a lot of electrical and mechanical prototyping and 3D modelling, and just kind of general design oversight of the project.
We've got Jason, who was doing a lot of the 3D modelling and the mechanical engineering as well. And then we've got Hugo, who's been just focusing on the design and the build of the electronics for the Vine arm.
It does actually, surprisingly, it works. It's tissues and plastic bag and ribbon. So there's one coming from here and from here.
Right. Okay. So you only need to do one of those.
Yeah. So if you then pulled, if you then pull this one.
Yeah.
So 1 second. So it comes. I first started working with Sophie. I first approached her because my dissertation for my MA had a prosthetic element, and was totally inspired by her work. And my graduate work was the third thumb, which is a 3D printed thumb extension for the hand, controlled by the feet. So the vine is actually inspired by my third thumb concept, that it is controlled by pressure sensors in her shoes, but obviously the vine has 4 degrees of freedom as opposed to the thumb, which only had 2.
My main input would be probably quite heavily the mechanical engineering side of things alongside Danny. And then on top of that, kind of deconstructing her original limb, and then combining that with the form of a tentacle that Danny and Sophie had designed. And then I turned that into 3D, created a chassis for Hugo's electronics to go into, and then it all just kind of came together.
So I'm working on the electronics and control and the actuation part of the vine. So I'm making a little circuit board that controls 4 motors. Each motor pulls on a tendon which travels down the vine, and the circuit board can measure the amount of force being applied to each tendon and control the force applied. And it also receives radio signals from electronics in the shoes, so the wearer can use her toes to control the vine by pressing down with her toes.
Yeah. So this is our skeleton for underneath the vine. So the proximal half is these wires here, and that gets this movement. So we've got this movement and then this movement as well.
And then of course we've got the materials arm, which is made up of various elements of the world that we live in, and or representative of various elements. And what's really nice about that is that she can she's kind of in control of how she kind of builds up her body. So she's kind of interchanging various sections of her arm, and she has the choice of which one she wants to use. Jason did a quick render of all the materials that we chose and how to divide the arm up, and we actually decided to, having seen that, to just change it, which was annoying for him, but it just meant that it looked less chunky, and we divided it up into further sections and then created more possibilities. So we had various parts 3D printed in other materials, so we had lots of options, because it's not until you actually assemble it that you realise whether it works or not. And then we've got the last one, which is the prism arm, which is geometric in shape, and then it's we've got this really incredible film that's just super reflective and with lots of different colours that come out depending on how you look at it. So it's forever changing its effect, which gives the feeling of like cosmos, and it will be making reflections on her, as well as the outside light and the environment having an effect on the arm. Okay, so I'll just show you the top of the vine, which I've been working on. Get in there. So this is the back. This is going to attach to the harness, and then the harness is going to attach to the socket, which will then attach to the vine. I'm just going to rework the front because I'm not entirely happy with that.
The vine arm was the second arm I worked on, and we had a few issues with that arm, very silly issues. Mostly things like the vine would keep twisting every time we would try to actuate the motors, the tendons.
So we were losing a lot of the movement in a twist, which wasn't ideal. So we wanted to really work on getting the right spring for the design, which ended up being a speedometer cable. And the spring is works well because it doesn't twist. So there's no twisting that's going to happen, which means that when the spine bends, it's going to bend up and back instead of kind of across, which is kind of taking it away from that really nice curve.
I studied special effects makeup to go into film industry. I kind of found out about prosthetics but in the medical world, and thought that would be really, really interesting and rewarding as well. And so I worked for this company for 8 years making realistic limbs.
Just for the end.
Yeah, that's better though.
Yeah.
What's that like on the top actually? Yeah, it's a bit too pale. I didn't really get to meet clients awful lot, so we got sent the information. And so I kind of was intrigued to know what the story behind a lot of these people that I was making these pieces for was. So I also had this kind of creative side that where it was more about expressing like the imagination, which I was kind of lacking in this job. And so I got to experiment in my spare time with the materials, make all sorts of unusual costumes. And then it just slowly it kind of came together. I thought, well, what about making some unusual prosthetic limbs? And at this, as around about that time, one of the few clients that I did get to see was this little girl, and she'd come in and she'd have something a bit different every time. So she wanted these little pigs, Peppa Pig, eating ice creams and riding bicycles around her legs. So they were just images. But every time she had her leg made each year, because she was growing, she wanted something different, and she'd get really excited about it. And I'd always really encourage her and be like, oh, you could have this next time. And so I could see that interaction she had was just really healthy, and from a rehabilitation perspective I thought it was really interesting, because rather than just having like a poorer version of what everyone else had, it just looked real but it wasn't. This you know, she had something unusual to talk about and something to look forward to, and all the other kids would be like, oh wow, what's that, what have you got this time? So I then decided to set up the Alternative Limb Project, where I continued to make realistic limbs but also unusual ones as well. And I got to meet the clients, which makes a massive difference.
Well, with the harness, it was just getting it to be the most minimal it could be. I looked at a lot of prosthetic harnesses, which are very structurally sound, but we wanted something really slim, because Kelly is so slim over her arm. So it's really kind of minimising that mechanism. So we've got bearings and bolts in there, connecting the arm to the harness, the top of the harness.
Didn't seem like a challenge to begin with, but kind of midway through the project there were like funny little things that came up as roadblocks, specifically the mechanical engineering for the finger joints. No one had ever actually made these types of mechanisms for the finger joints before, so I had to basically make them on the fly. Kind of based it off a mannequin hand, the way you've got like the spheres with the fingers pivoting, but then kind of merged it with like an interlocking mechanism. So now it's a completely seamless blend, which for some reason they don't have on mannequin hands, but I think they should.
So now we've got the silicone skin all cured off, and that was obviously matches her other side. Above that there's a wooden socket, and then above that there's going to be the harness, which Danny's worked hard to get super nice and clean. It looks really good. And then coming down these sections here, these are going to be in various materials. They're going to magnet on and off, so she should be able to interchange depending on how she's feeling that day, or what she feels suits what she's wearing.
So this is our first rough draft of the hand. We 3D printed Kelly's hand and started to split it up into the different materials that we wanted. So you can start to see it coming together now. So we've got a few different 3D printed parts. This is a 3D printed white Formlabs resin, and then this is from Shapeways, these two metal pieces which look amazing. And then this has got a metal powder in the 3D print, and this is a copper powder. And then you can see there's a couple of other pieces here that we've got a few different options for. So we're going to start putting it all together and start to see the different layout and see how it starts to come together visually.
Jason created like a few different versions, so files of what the geometric structure could be depending on the low poly and high poly, large triangles and small triangles, and then we realised that actually we wanted a mixture of all of them, so it made it quite complex for him to design, but I think the result is really good, so it's quite exciting.
Not too challenging, to be honest. It's actually been fairly simple to do. Using a lot of the softwares that I use, such as ZBrush, Rhino, etc., you can actually really lower a polygon count to the point where you can create 5 or 6 different arms and then blend them together, just out of triangles, loads of different triangles. And then by experimenting with that, you create these really nice faceted designs. And then from there, essentially we've used like an iridescent film onto vacuum formable plastic, PETG. And then we can 3D print those parts, put them on a vacuum former with the vacuumed film, and then just vacuum over the original object. So it should be pretty cool.
This is just a test piece of the palm side of the prism arm. So we've just got a little geometric surface area of the palm that we're going to use as a mould to then vacuum the plastic into with the film as well. So we can then generate a kind of a surface, a geometric surface, and see whether we're happy with that.
I was more to do with the initial concept creation, really looking at that iridescent film and seeing how it will all pull together. But that is definitely Jason's baby because it's just kind of completely 3D modelled and then vacuum formed.
Essentially, I did my postgrad. It was an MSc in Applied Technologies about 2 years ago. It's actually how I first met Sophie. My tutor said to me we needed to do a project where we had to get out of our comfort zone. It had to be something that related to us. And so with me, I actually have quite a rare genetic condition called Charcot-Marie-Tooth. And it basically attacks the peripheral nervous system. So potentially in 10-15 years' time, I might not have control of my limbs anymore. So I thought, how could I combat this? You know, being a designer is such a part of my core. It's who I am and always has been. And to not be able to design for me would just be awful. So I thought, what could I do? So I ended up deciding to try and make a set of alternative limbs that I could then basically plug onto my arms and then still design with. I think working with Sophie and then meeting these amputees and trying to find out how they deal with it, the psychological side of losing a limb, overcoming it, what that means when you're interacting with people and objects. It's really changed my mindset to it, and it's kind of made me not scared of the thought of one day I might lose my arms. If anything, it's kind of embracing in a way. It's quite a nice way to look at it, I think. I think you kind of need to. Why see it as a disability when potentially I can actually get better control over designing than what I already have.
So these pieces not only represent Kelly and what makes her tick, but also they're like forms of expression, obviously, for her, but they're also hopefully act as pieces of art in their own right that can get people quite excited about the idea of prosthetic, the fact that there could potentially be no limitations. get everybody really excited about the human body and the way you can evolve yourself in whatever way you choose, and just bringing that imagination to life. So when I mix these together, they'll start to catalyse, which means the process of curing will take place, and then I'll once they're mixed together, then I can pour them in the mould, and it will just take minutes to then set.
And this is why there's silicone everywhere.
Working with Sophie it's been a really incredible journey. I've really enjoyed working with Sophie. You know, she's such a character. She's so much passion. She's really, really nice to work with. She's straight to the point with things. But she can also have her moments. She'll be like, oh, can we just do this? Can we just do that? And it will re-involve 3D designing the entire limb, or rechanging an entire mechanism or set of materials. But it all contributes towards a better limb in the end. So it's totally worth it.
I think the vine is definitely going to be the showstopper, I think, because it's just so weird and beautiful.
I'm not sure which one's my favourite. I actually really like them all from different perspectives. I'm really excited about the vine arm, just to see Kelly interacting with that, because that's just going to be quite mind-blowing. I can't wait to see her kind of coiling it around her own limbs. And yeah, but the materials arm is like really, I think, going to be quite sophisticated, and yeah, and also the idea of interchanging different sections of her body is really nice. And yet the prism one is completely like, it will just constantly change, and depending on where she is and how the light hits it. So actually, I don't think I've got a favourite. I actually really like them all, and I like the way that we've just kind of gone in very different directions with all of them, but yet they all speak to Kelly in some way.